Long ago, in a place far, far away, there lived a king who had 11 sons and one daughter. His daughter, her name was Eliza, was a beautiful child. And the princes, well, they were handsome princesses. They did everything correctly. They grew up nice. They were growing up nicely. The king was very pleased. And the children were very happy. But that was not to be. For soon after Eliza was born, the queen mother died, leaving the king heartbroken. A few years passed when Eliza was just a little child when the king came back with a woman. Nobody knew where he met her. He just claimed that he fell in love with this woman and he was to make her queen, his queen. The princes were okay with this, having lost their mother. They were worried about little Eliza. And Eliza was too young to remember her mother, so she was okay with that too. But what they didn't know was that this woman was a sorceress who had bewitched the king to get him to marry her. Soon there were wedding bells, and the king did marry this witch. But afterwards, even though the princess and Eliza were very, very nice to the new queen, she was not. She was envious that Eliza was such a beautiful child. Soon, she convinced the king that to make her a good princess, humble, meek, and virtuous, she would have to live outside the palace. The king agreed and sent little Eliza to live in a cottage, hidden from her brothers. Soon the queen also started to gossip about the princes. Things that the king at the beginning didn't believe, but afterwards he did. Lie, 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 they say. Something must be true. And soon the king didn't want to see his sons. The queen witch took the opportunity, took the princes to a place and said, "Fly away, fly like great birds in the sky." She chanted a spell. And even though she wanted to turn these princes into ugly ravens and ugly crows, she couldn't, because they were good people. They had noble hearts. So they turned into beautiful white swans with long necks and great feathers. Off they went. They flew and they flew over and over trying to find their little sister, but they never could. Soon they left the land because the spell was of that. They couldn't remain in their homeland. The years went by, and when Eliza turned 15, she was to go home to her castle, to her father. The queen was not happy and wanted to get rid of her, but the king insisted on seeing his daughter. The young maiden, beautiful and fair, went to the castle. She was dressed very humbly, but she was so gorgeous that nobody could ever doubt that she was the king's daughter. But the wicked sorceress thought of a plan. She drew a bath inside the maiden's chamber, and secretly she took 3 toads. To the first toad, she gave it a kiss and said to it, "Lay yourself on her hair so that she may become stupid as you are, and dropped it into the water. To the second one, she gave her a kiss. She gave it a kiss and said, place yourself on her forehead so that she may become as ugly as you are. And she put that toad in the water. Place yourself on her heart, she said to the third one, kissing it, so that Eliza can become as evil as you are and suffer. And into the bath went the toad. Then the water turned green. The queen helped Eliza undress and then helped her into the bath. Eliza dipped herself inside, and she didn't notice when the three toads placed themselves, one in her hair, the second one on her forehead, and the third one on her heart. When she came out of the bath, she didn't notice anything different, except there were 3 red poppies floating over the water. She dried herself, dressed herself, and when the queen came to see Eliza, she saw that she was still as beautiful as ever. Filled with hate and envy, the queen grabbed walnut juice and started to rub this ointment over the face of Eliza. She matted her hair and dressed her in rags, so that the king, when he saw his daughter, he did not know her. Away with you, he said. What has happened to my daughter? So the queen took the opportunity and told the guards to take out Eliza far away from there. The guards roughly took the princess, dragged her out, and threw her. She didn't know where. Sadly, she got up and started walking. And she did not really care where she was walking to, so she didn't notice when she started to go inside a forest. She walked all day until finally, exhausted, she sat down on the moss, put her head over a stump, and fell asleep. The next morning, Eliza looked up. The sun was high. She could see it. Well, the trees were fairly thick, but she could still see the sun's rays. She got up and she heard the water running, a stream. So she went there, and the water was so calm, yet running. She could see her reflection. What she saw took her so by surprise that she was struck dumb. Indeed, she was so ugly. She grabbed the water and started to rub off the ointment that her stepmother had put on her. She again undressed and dipped herself into the fresh, cool river water. When she came out, the young maiden's appearance was back to its original beautiful state. But she was alone. She thought of her brothers. Where could they be? Who knows? She was hungry. Where would she get food? That she didn't know either. So she started walking, praying to God that he would help her. When along came an old crooked woman with a basket, Eliza, trusting people, went up to her and asked if she had not seen 11 young, handsome princesses around here. Well, the woman said, "No, I'm sorry, you must be hungry." And the woman gave Eliza something to eat. She thanked the old woman. "But I did see 11 swans flying around here. But these swans had crowns on their heads. Eliza thought, well, her stepmother tried to bewitch her. Would they be her brothers? She asked directions as to where she had seen those 11 swans. The old woman pointed down by the river. Follow the river. It'll take you to the beach. There, by the shores, that's where I saw them. The woman, Eliza thanked the woman and went off. On her way, she walked and she walked and she walked, following that stream, until finally the forest cleared. And yes, there was a beach. And the vast ocean was in front of her. She had walked the entire day, so the sun was now dripping into the horizon. But she couldn't see any swans, nor her brothers. She sat down and waited a little bit more, until finally, in the sky, she could see some few birds coming her way. She squinted her eyes to get a better look. Yes, they were swans. And they did have the crowns on them, coming towards the shore. The sun was about to disappear when the swans came down in a great swoop onto the shore. They landed, and as the sun completely set and was gone, the birds started to wave and wave and wave until finally all the feathers came off, and there stood 11 handsome princesses. Eliza recognized her brothers. She gave a great shout of joy. The brothers turned around and saw their little sister turned into such a beautiful woman. Hugs and laughter was everywhere. Eliza went to her brothers, told everything that had happened, and her eldest brother took her into a huge hug. The others wanted to do the same, but Eliza couldn't let go. We, as you can see, we are swans during the day, but we are men at night. Only when the sun comes down can we take our human form. We have searched for you for many years. Thankfully, we have found you. And it was good that we found you today because we could only stay in our homeland for 11 days. This was our 9th. We only have 2 days left to roam around our country, see our father, the grave where our mother is, try to find you. In 2 days, we must leave to a country that is further off than you have ever been to. I wish you could come with me. I wish you could come with us, they said. Eliza was determined to go. She had nothing there now. So they sat down and they talked the entire night until finally exhaustion led Eliza to fall asleep. The next morning, the sun was high, and her brothers, who were turned into swans, had left, except one, the youngest one, who lay his head on her lap, and she stroked his beautiful feathers. He had stayed with her to keep her company. At nightfall, the siblings together were thinking of a way until finally the eldest said, I think we have a way. Why don't we create a huge net for you? If my arms are strong enough to take you through the forest, won't all of our wings be strong enough to take you all the way to our new country? So they got to work. They worked bows and they worked leaves and they worked trees, everything, and finally they had a huge net in which Eliza lay down. In the morning, the brothers, with their beaks, caught the net and started to fly up and up and up and up and over the huge ocean. When Eliza woke up, she saw that she was flying thousands of miles over the sea, but she wasn't scared. When she looked up, she saw that one of the swans was giving her shelter from the sun. And beside her, there was many, many berries and things that she could eat. She smiled to her brothers thankfully. They had agreed that they would fly to a small rock where they would stay during the night. And then they would take her again to finish the journey to the new country where they dwelled. Hours had passed, and the rock was not to be seen. The sun was setting, and Eliza got worried. If they didn't make it to that small rock in the middle of the ocean, her brothers would plummet down and they would all drown. She said a little prayer and started to search even more, until finally, when the sun was half set, she saw it. It was so tiny, but it was there, a glimmer of hope in the middle of the ocean. Down and down and down they went, until finally they landed, and not too soon, because the sun had disappeared. The brothers gathered around their sister who was in the middle, and they protected her during the night. They protected her against the winds, against the waves, but they were thankful to be together. In the morning, they set off. And it was only a few hours until finally they reached the land. They set her down and took her to a small cave where they slept. In the night, the brothers took their human forms and they started to talk and to laugh, and they told her of all the adventures that they had been through. If only I could break the spell, said Eliza. I'm afraid that's impossible, said one of the brothers. The only one who could possibly know is our stepmother. Why would she tell us? But there must be some way, thought Eliza. Well, don't worry about it. We'll see about it tomorrow. We all have to rest. So they all went to their places. Eliza had a little small room for herself. She lay her head down and fell fast asleep. That night she was dreaming. She dreamt of the forest, of the river where she was walking. And when she turned around, she saw the old woman coming towards her. Eliza knew that it was a dream, so she didn't say anything. The woman looked at her and said, "You know, there's a way to take out the spell, to break the spell of your brothers." Eliza opened her eyes. "How is it? How do I do it?" The old woman, with a crooked smile, looked at her and said, "It will take great pain. It will make you suffer. You must go to the churchyards and find nettles that will bring blisters to your hands and make them burn. You must grab them with your bare hands, and then, with your bare feet, chop them and make them into flax. And with that, you must create 11 coats. 11 coats for your brothers. But be warned, said the old woman. Be warned, because from the time that you begin to the moment that you finish, you cannot utter a single word. In the morning, Eliza woke up. She was alone, for her brothers had gone out to find food. And she went out. She found a small graveyard. And there, she found the nettles. She got onto her knees, gave her prayer of thanks, and started her task. Her hands burned with the nettles, but she was determined to free her brothers. She grabbed as many as she could, took them back to the cave, and started to create the flax with her feet. When that was done, she began to knit the first of the coats. They were to be long-sleeve coats. At night, her brothers were asking her what she was doing, but she couldn't say a word because it would bring death to her brothers. On and on and on she went, and her brothers knew that she was up to something for their benefit, so they left her alone. It was a few days, and she had already finished the first coat and started off on the second one, when she heard a bark and a horn. She grabbed the flax and put it in a place where probably somebody wouldn't get it, and she sat on it, and in came, bounding in, a dog, and then a second dog, and then the horn sounded again, so much clearer. The dog went in and out, barking and barking. She wasn't scared of dogs, but she was scared what they would do with the coat and the flex and all her work. And in came the most handsome man that she had ever laid eyes on. Yes, it was the king of the country. And when he saw Eliza, he saw how beautiful she was, her eyes crystal clear. He knew that he had fallen in love. "What are you doing here, young maiden?" Eliza shook her head dumb. "But you can't live here, such a beautiful person like you. If your heart is as beautiful as you are, as your face is, then you cannot live in a cave. Come, I will take you home." Eliza shook her head and tried everything to stop the king, but the king grabbed her, put her on his horse, and said, "You will thank me later." And off they went, galloping miles and miles and miles away, until finally she saw a palace. The king took her and told the servants to bathe her and dress her. They wove pearls into her hair. And when she appeared in front of the king, everybody knew that she had to be the daughter of a noble king, except one person, the viceroy, who was determined to keep the king single. No heir should ever come forth. He tried to convince the king that she was just a witch that had cast a spell on him, but the king didn't say anything. He took Eliza by the hand and took her through the palace to a small room. When he opened the door, he showed her that it was somewhat like the cave that she was in with her brothers, and on the floor was the flax that she had left, and on the ceiling, the first coat. Eliza was so overjoyed, she grabbed the king's hand and started to kiss him and thank him. I don't know what you're doing with this, but I think it's important to you. Eliza nodded vigorously that it was. Well, you can get on with your work, he said. The days went by, and Eliza worked from morning to dusk and from dusk to morning. The king, little by little, started to fall in love with her even more. But the day came when Eliza didn't have any more flax. She didn't know what to do. She had to find a graveyard to get the nettles, to make the flax, to make the coat. So she decided to go. Dead at night, she left the palace, tiptoed her way through the streets, and found the graveyard. When she passed through the gate, she saw two ghouls. They were feasting on something that she did not want to know what it was. She started to grab the nettles, take them out, and stealthily she went back into the palace. She thought nobody had seen her. But there was one person who did. The king had decided to make Eliza his queen. So he had everything prepared for a marriage. He proposed, and Eliza, who was herself falling in love with this good man, said yes. A great marriage was prepared, and it was celebrated king style. Eliza was happy. She had the man that she did fall in love with, and she had her coats. She was almost finishing. She was started on the 10th coat, when once again she was out of flax. This time, with a determined heart, she left the palace. Unfortunately, she was followed. This time, not only by, you probably know who it was, the viceroy. Not only by the viceroy, but also the king. For the viceroy had told the king that she was a witch and she was going to the graveyard to do wicked things. The king at the first, he didn't believe it. But then he wanted to see for himself. He saw that she was out of nettles, and at that moment she was going to go to the graveyard. So he followed her. Inside the graveyard, they found the ghouls, but they didn't see Eliza. The king, heartbroken, told the guards to take Eliza into the dungeon, but at the same time, leave the nettles, the flax, and the coats with her. She didn't care. She had lived in a small cottage. She had lived in riches. She only wanted to save her brothers. So she started her work again and again. In the dead of night, she finally found her brother. They had looked for her all over the place until finally they found the palace. They had heard about a new queen who was to be sentenced to death for witchery. Eliza couldn't say a word, but she looked hopeful into the eyes of her brother. "We'll get you out," he said. But the sun was almost up. Eliza worked hard and hard on the 11th coat, the last one. Knitted and knitted and knitted. She went and went and went, working and working. The guards took her out, put her into a cart. She grabbed those coats as if they were her life. And while she was going to the place where they were going to burn her alive, she was still working. All of a sudden, her brothers, as swans, came around and stooped around her. The villagers were screaming, "Witch! Witch! Burn her!" The king was crying, for he truly loved Eliza. The viceroy was smiling. And the 11 brothers were trying to stop all the things that were throwing at Eliza, until finally she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed the first coat and threw it up into the air, and inside went one of the first of her brothers. She started to throw all the coats into the air, and each swan would go in and they would transform into her brothers. Until finally, the last one, she threw it up, and the youngest brother was transformed, except his arm was that of a swan's wing, for she was not able to finish the last one. "Finally, I can speak," said Eliza. "I am innocent. I am no witch." The king was overjoyed. "Stop," he said. He went over, and the brothers surrounded Eliza and started hugging her sister. She was so exhausted that she fell faint in her brother's arms. The brothers started to talk and say everything that had happened, how their stepmother had cast a spell over them, and how Eliza took it upon herself to use nettles and to create these coats. When Eliza came back, she was in the arms of her loved one. He took her on her horse. He took her on his horse and took her away. The brothers went back with their sister and their new brother-in-law. But there was one that did not have a happy ending. The king, before he returned into the palace, looked back at the viceroy with such a glare. He whispered something to the guards and took his bride inside and his new brothers. And of the viceroy, well, to this day, nobody knows what happened to them. And that is my story.